Before the start of last season, I came out with 5 bold predictions for the year. It was around the time that I started the channel. I also did the same thing mid-season after the trade deadline, and I'm going to do it yet again as we head into one of the most anticipated Bull seasons we have seen in a long time, and that's what I'll be going over in today's video. So what's going on, everyone? You're listening to Bull Central here. Hope you're all doing well. Guys, I always love this time of year as we start winding down to the start of training camp, which then leads into the preseason and then the regular season. It's crazy that we are just a little over 1 month away from the Bulls' first regular season game on October 20th. I don't know about you guys, but I have personally been counting down the days, and the reason I like this time of year is because it's a great time to make your predictions on various things that will happen throughout the season. And I will have other predictions videos that will come out as we get closer to training camp, but in this one specifically, we're going to be talking about my bold predictions. Now, to be clear, these predictions might seem a bit far-fetched to some, but that's why they're called bold predictions. They are more predictions that I think are probably not likely going to happen, but I also wouldn't be shocked if they occur, and I don't think that they're out of the realm of possibility, very similar to a hot take, if you will. Also, for these bold predictions, these are not necessarily things that I want to happen or don't want to happen, but rather just based on what we know of the roster, the coaching staff, and the front office, what I believe would happen. So, with that being said, let's get into these, shall we? Now, let me start with a non-bold prediction, but I had to call it out just because of all the rumors going around recently, and that's that Zach Lavine will re-sign with the Bulls for a max contract extension. The reason I don't think this is a bold prediction is because I think it's extremely likely that Zach will stay in Chicago. I know there were all these reports that the Celtics are interested in Lavine and plan to pursue him in free agency, and I know a number of you reached out to me asking to make a video on this topic, and the reason I didn't was because that isn't news to me. I'm sure there are going to be a lot of teams interested in pursuing Zach Lavine in free agency, and with good reason. He's an incredible player. The Celtics are no exception to that. But the fact of the matter is, the Bulls can offer Lavine more money than any other team and for the longest term deal. And the fact that Lavine hasn't given any indication that he's potentially looking at other opportunities. He stated he wants what he deserves, and if the Bulls give him a max contract and he opts out to go to another team for less, I mean, that's on Lavine, then that really isn't anything the Bulls can do at that point. A lot of this will really depend on how the Bulls do this season and whether Lavine would want to head to greener pastures if the Bulls continue to struggle, even after upgrading the roster. But I just don't see that happening. Lavine is going to re-sign with the Bulls, and honestly, we're going to have to get used to these rumors. They're going to be happening all season, especially if the Bulls get off to a slow start. That being said, though, my first actual bold prediction for the season, which relates to why I think Lavine will stay in Chicago, is that the Bulls will finish with the 5 seed in the East. Yes, I mentioned this in my last video, but yes, I believe the Bulls are going to be better than the Pacers, Hornets, the Knicks, the Hawks, and Celtics, and will finish with the 5th seed. And that's just part of the prediction, because not only that, the Bulls are going to win that first round series, advancing to the conference semifinals, defeating either the Miami Heat or the Philadelphia 76ers, despite not having home court advantage. I really do think that by the Bulls carrying that hype and momentum going into the playoffs for the first time in what will then be 5 years, they will take that motivation and take out one of these teams that everyone had ranked so highly, much higher than the Bulls. I think the talent-wise, they match up against these teams nicely and would make it a very competitive series. My next bold prediction: Coby White will be traded at the trade deadline. Look, let me be clear. I do not want this to happen. I would prefer to hang on to Coby for a little while longer, but the fact of the matter is this front office has constructed a roster in which Coby no longer fits in with as well, given the fact that they brought in Lonzo Ball and Alex Caruso in free agency and drafted another combo guard who is the same age as Coby and Dosunmu. Based on the move to bring in Lonzo and the contract that they gave him, he is now the point guard for the future for this Bulls team. Which you might have said, well, Coby was never really designed for that type of role anyway, which is valid, but the point is, Coby White is still a very talented player, but he's not good enough to start over guys like Lonzo and Lavine. But because I personally think he's more than just a bench player, but not good enough to be a starter on a playoff team anyway, that other teams will be looking to make a trade for Coby. Rebuilding teams who are in need of a young, strong scoring guard with great work ethic, and because of that, the front office is going to take advantage of the trade market for Coby, and since they've committed to Lonzo and Caruso long term, and now even Ayo after drafting him, and because Coby is one of the only men still standing outside of Lavine anyway from the Garpax regime that the front office will field offers and will ultimately move him shortly before the trade deadline for additional assets, whether that be in the form of an older established player that fits a need, particularly for some front court depth that fits the Bulls timeline anyway, or potentially some draft capital, especially depending on whether the Bulls have to forfeit draft picks in this ongoing Lonzo investigation, which at the time of this recording is still ongoing. I don't want to give up on Kobe because, again, I think he'll be a great scoring spark off the bench for the Bulls, which the Bulls are going to need in the second unit. At this point, he's really their only scoring option off the bench, but I think as the season progresses, the writing will be on the wall that Kobe White is going to be on his way out. Number 3, the Bulls will have 2 All-Stars this upcoming season, and they will be Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan, not Nikola Vucevic. I know last season Vucevic was an All-Star while DeRozan was not and hasn't actually been an All-Star since 2018, back when he was still in the Raptors. Now, I explained this in a recent video that although Vucevic was putting up ridiculous numbers on the Magic, putting up 24 and 12, a lot of that is due to the fact that he was the number 1 option on a very bad team. After the trade and Vucevic joined the Bulls, his numbers did fall a bit, both his scoring, efficiency, and even slightly his rebounding. Now that's really a product of the fact that he joined another all-star and elite level scorer who was the number 1 option for the Bulls, and so Vucevic's role was no longer being the primary scorer like he was in Orlando. With the Bulls now adding another elite scorer in DeMar DeRozan and another up-and-coming player in Lonzo Ball, his role is going to be reduced even further, at least in terms of his overall production. Obviously, his role is still going to be incredibly important, especially with the limited big men that the Bulls have, but he's not going to have to be relied upon as much for his scoring like we saw in Orlando. He's not going to be relied upon as much for his playmaking, because people forget Vucevic is actually a pretty solid passer for a big man, but with Lonzo and DeMar, Vucevic likely isn't going to be averaging 4 assists per game like we saw last year. And overall, Vucevic isn't going to be putting up as many shot attempts either. I do still think Vuce will be a 20 and 10 threat every night, likely finishing the season averaging 19 and 11 boards per game, which in my view is still all-star worthy, but the league likely won't see it as enough to be selected as an all-star. And for DeRozan, well, I think he's really going to turn some heads this season, and not only increasing his scoring output because he's going to be able to get more open looks now that he's not the only scoring threat on the floor like he was with the Spurs, so he won't see as many double teams. He's got a true point guard in Lonzo Ball who will be able to run the floor and facilitate both for him and Lavine, especially in transition. And I think DeRozan, with this new environment and being in a big market with lots of talent around him, is out to prove that he's still the player he used to be, and to prove the doubters wrong who gave up on him, labeling him as a guy who doesn't fit in today's NBA. And so I think because of all of this and the fact that hopefully the Bulls as a whole will be surprising the league in terms of their performance, and that they're not a fringe playoff team, and with a good record heading towards the All-Star break, both Lavine and DeRozan will be recognized for that as All-Stars. Number 4, the Bulls will be a top 10 defensive team in the league. Now, I've talked about this before, and it's another reason why I think the Bulls are being slept on, because you have so many people talking about how bad the Bulls are going to be on defense, how they went all in on Lonzo and DeMar and completely forgot about their defensive woes. And because of this supposed terrible defense, they aren't going to be a good team this year. Well, I've gone into great detail in another video on why this couldn't be further from the truth, but I'll spare you all the details on that so as not to sound redundant. But the Bulls as a whole, they're actually going to be better on defense than most people think if you look at the individual player defensive statistics from this roster. And I think people forget that the Bulls were actually 12th last season in terms of their defensive rating. Now, there are issues in my view with how defensive rating is calculated, as a lot of assumptions are made when putting net defensive ratings together, but it is the most commonly used metrics to determine a team's defensive ranking. Now, I also like to use the old school straight to the point method of points allowed by your opponent, because at the end of the day, how many points you give up is the difference between winning and losing basketball games. If you go off points allowed, the Bulls were 14th in the league, still though better than half of the league. So I get that the Bulls lost key defensive players in Thaddeus Young and Daniel Tice, who really was only there for a handful of games anyway after the trade deadline, but they still have Patrick Williams, they still have Troy Brown Jr., they added in other key defensive players on the perimeter in Lonzo Ball and Alex Caruso, even Dosunmu, and even more underrated defensive players in Tony Bradley, Derrick Jones Jr., and even Stanley Johnson, if he makes the team, that is. Like, how is this team going to be any worse on defense than they were last season, which was still better than half of the teams in the league anyway? So yes, I think the Bulls are going to finish top 10 in the league, both in defensive net rating and points allowed. I think they'll likely finish 8th or 9th in the league by those metrics. Again, I'm not saying the Bulls are going to be an elite defensive team. They are still going to have their struggles, especially in the starting lineup on defense, but they're going to be a solid defensive team and not a trash one like the media is making them out to be. And then finally, my 5th bold take for the Bulls this season, and really this one is a pretty big stretch and probably one of the boldest of them all, but I'm gonna say that Dosunmu gets all rookie second team honors. Yes, our second round draft pick, Ayo, will make an all rookie team. Now look, I know this might sound crazy, and let's be honest, it kind of is, but here's the thing. Coby White likely will be out, still rehabbing his shoulder injury to start the year. And at the time of this recording anyway, no updates have been shared on his status other than that he's expected to be reevaluated in the next few weeks. Doesn't mean that he'll be cleared to play, it's very possible he may not be back until December. This gives Ayo ample opportunity and minutes to showcase what he's worth coming off the bench behind Lavine or Lonzo, sharing the backcourt with Alex Caruso in the second unit. He's not going to have to compete for minutes with Coby White, which Coby would most certainly get over someone like Ayo. And then, if my other bold prediction becomes true as well and the Bulls actually trade Coby by the deadline, Ayo will get more minutes on the court, and if he can showcase his ability to play on both ends of the floor and be a solid two-way contributor off the bench for a playoff team, that's going to get him some all-rookie votes, and it could be just enough to get him all rookie second team honors. I know it's a bit of a stretch, and again, a lot of it depends on how he actually does in an NBA game, since we've never seen him play in one. A lot of it also depends on Coby's health and whether or not he actually gets traded, and of course, obviously the level of competition from other rookies, which will definitely be there. Those are my bold predictions though, guys. Let me know in the comments how ridiculous you think some of these are, or maybe you felt they weren't too far off. Either way, let me know in the comments, and also give me your bold predictions for this upcoming season. I would love to hear them. As always, guys, be sure to subscribe if you're a Bulls fan, as I do post daily Bulls content. Thanks again for tuning in, guys, and I will catch you in the next one.